Daniela Spitia Flores' final moments captured on camera. Hours later, her lifeless body is discovered in a motel room. After committing the crime, the killer brazenly walked away in plain sight. Who was this young woman, and why has her murder shaken Colombian society to its core? Stay with us to understand what truly happened. Daniela Spitia Flores was born in the late 1990s in the bustling and colorful city of Barranquilla, Colombia. She was the fourth of 5 children born to Genis Patricia Flores Pineda, a woman whose strength would define Daniela's childhood. From a very young age, Daniela grew up in the Villa del Carmen neighborhood, a working-class area where she shared her daily life with her 4 siblings. Of them, only 2 names are publicly known, Eduardo and Eliana. Her childhood unfolded there, in a close-knit family environment where affection and support were abundant. She was raised by her mother, constantly surrounded by the love of her grandmother and other relatives who lived nearby, forming a solid network of care. Genis always felt that Daniela's birth was a true miracle. During the pregnancy, at just 4 months gestation, a severe complication occurred. Daniela's body detached from the uterine wall. Faced with this critical situation, doctors held little hope for her survival. They waited with resignation for her tiny heart to stop beating, at which point they would proceed with an extraction. But then the unexpected happened. Despite the grim prognosis, Daniela's heart kept beating. This astonished the specialists and prompted a change of course. They decided to give Genis all the medical attention necessary to try and carry the pregnancy to term. From her earliest years, those who knew Daniela remember her as a beacon of energy and spontaneity. She was a cheerful child, the kind who filled any family gathering with life. Her natural charisma made her the center of attention, and her passion for dance was unmistakable. Whenever there was a party, Daniela didn't just participate. She shone, captivating everyone with a talent that seemed to flow effortlessly from her. A constant figure in her life was her cousin, Abigail Lopez. They shared a special connection, a bond forged in childhood that remained strong through the years. The two attended the same high school and spent countless hours together, delighting in doing each other's hair, painting their nails, and applying makeup. Rituals they cherished and continued well into adulthood. Daniela would often go to Abigail's house, which was nearby, especially before family gatherings at their grandmother's. There they would get ready together, turning those moments into a private, joyful tradition. However, Daniela's life took a significant turn when she was just 13 years old. At that age, she began a relationship with Dimer Eduardo Diaz Mendoza, a young man 5 years her senior whom she had known since she was a little girl. According to Eduardo, Daniela's younger brother, the relationship between Daniela and Dimer developed naturally. They lived close to each other in the same neighborhood and had grown up together. Eduardo recalled them being inseparable as children, spending hours playing in the streets or simply sharing time. But as adolescence arrived, their friendship began to change. The games and childish companionship evolved into something more intimate. Though they were young and she was still a minor, they decided to formalize their union and get married. Soon they started a family. Their first child was born when Daniela was not yet 16, and later the couple had a daughter. Becoming a mother at such a young age completely transformed Daniela's life. She was thrust into adult responsibilities, forced to leave her adolescence behind to focus on her new role. Her energy was divided between work and the constant demands of her children. Despite this burden, Daniela never lost her essence. She held on to her characteristic joy and her deep devotion to her family. She always found ways to surprise her loved ones, especially on birthdays, which she celebrated with great care. Her children and her mother were the primary recipients of her daily affection. Though she faced financial hardships, she never stopped striving to provide for them, often going without so that they would have everything they needed. On the surface, Daniela seemed to have a quiet life, built on love and family commitment. But this image concealed a much darker reality. Inside their home, her relationship with Dahmer was marked by violence. Little is known about his life, but it is estimated he was born around 1994 in Barranquilla. And like Daniela, grew up in the same neighborhood. Her relatives described him as aggressive and controlling, an impulsive man plagued by obsessive behaviors and an addiction to illegal substances. From the beginning of their relationship, he subjected Daniela to both physical and psychological abuse. On several occasions, according to witnesses, he threatened to kill her, stating coldly that it was not an empty threat, and that if he did it, he would vanish without a trace. Over time, the abuse intensified, reaching a breaking point in 2018. It was then that Daniela, determined to endure no more, made the courageous decision to separate from Dahmer. But the separation did not end her suffering. Despite the physical distance, the harassment continued. Dahmer relentlessly stalked and pressured her. This time, however, the abuse did not remain in the shadows. Daniela decided to speak out and take legal action, filing at least 2 reports for domestic violence, the last of which was dated May 8, 2020. Although she lived in constant fear of his threats, Daniela's resolve was firm. She would not go back to him. She was determined to sever all emotional ties and rebuild her life. With new determination, she found a job as a sales advisor at a cell phone store and was making plans to pursue a professional career. Those around her noticed the change. She was motivated, excited about the future, and seemed to be finally on a path toward a free, full, and different life. Tragically, this new beginning was cut short by an event that no one could have foreseen. On Monday, August 17, 2020, Daniela left her home like any other day. Before leaving, she told her grandmother she would be back soon. On her way, she stopped at the house of a neighbor who often cared for her children and left them in her care. Then, she walked down the neighborhood stairs, heading to a place her family did not know, unaware she was walking toward her end. As Daniela's mother, Genis, would later recount, Dahmer had contacted her daughter the day before. He insisted on meeting, claiming he wanted to give her money for child support. Daniela, now 21 and tired of his constant attempts to re-enter her life, made it clear she wanted no contact. She told him that if he truly wanted to fulfill his duties as a father, he should do so through other means without needing to see her. Despite her refusal, Dahmer somehow managed to persuade her. Daniela agreed to meet him. After that moment, her family never heard from her again. Hours later that same day, Genis received a devastating phone call, the kind no mother should ever receive. It was Dahmer, Daniela's ex-partner and the father of her 2 children, on the line. He called to inform her of something horrific. He had murdered Daniela. His words were as cold as they were final. The news plunged the family into an indescribable state of anguish. Yet despite the shock, they tried to convince themselves it might not be true, that Dahmer was just trying to scare them as he had done before. He had threatened to kill her and call them afterward in the past. So even as everything pointed to the worst, they clung to the faint hope that he had only hurt her and that she was still alive. Driven by this possibility, they began a desperate search. They went to hospitals, clinics, and police stations across Barranquilla, asking if a woman matching Daniela's description had been admitted. But no lead brought them any closer to finding her. That fragile hope was shattered when a police officer contacted Genis. He asked her to come to the city morgue. The body of a young woman matching her daughter's description had been found hours earlier in a motel in downtown Barranquilla. There, in one of the rooms, lay the body of a young woman with no identification or personal belongings. She was registered as a Jane Doe. The confirmation was devastating. It was Daniela. Her body had been discovered around noon by a motel employee who recalled seeing the young woman arrive with a man a few hours earlier. According to her testimony, the man's behavior aroused suspicion when he was seen leaving the establishment alone, carrying the purse Daniela had with her when she checked in. Before leaving, he exchanged a few words with the receptionist. When asked about his companion, he replied casually that she was changing her clothes and would be out shortly. Then he left in a hurry. As time passed and the woman did not emerge from the room, the motel staff grew concerned. They went up to check, and after knocking on the door several times without a response, they decided to open it. What they found inside left them horrified. Daniela was lying lifeless on the bed, covered with a sheet, a pillow placed over her face. She had a severe wound on her chest, likely inflicted with a piece of broken glass found nearby. The staff immediately alerted the authorities. The family was called to identify the body, and the confirmation that it was Daniela was a soul-crushing blow. There was no doubt as to who was responsible. Everyone pointed to Dahmer, her ex-partner, as the perpetrator of this brutal act. Motel employees not only confirmed that he was the man who had accompanied her, but also identified him without hesitation. However, what followed only deepened the family's despair. Despite the gravity of the crime, the police response was slow. No immediate arrest was made, and this inaction created profound anguish among Daniela's loved ones. Friends and family began to speak out, demanding that authorities act swiftly to prevent another woman from suffering the same fate. Eduardo, Daniela's younger brother, articulated what everyone was feeling. Dahmer was a dangerous man, and as long as he was free, no one was safe. Their concern intensified when local media reported that, after the crime, Dahmer had called his own family to ask for clothes and money to escape. That call was allegedly made from a store in the very neighborhood where both he and Daniela had lived. Neighbors who overheard the conversation did not hesitate to inform Daniela's family, terrified he might flee before facing justice. The family's pain was indescribable, but the most heart-wrenching toll was on her two young children. Guinness shared with a broken heart that her 2-year-old granddaughter was refusing to eat. Though she couldn't understand what had happened, she felt the void. Her 5-year-old grandson had not yet been told of his mother's death, but he was beginning to notice her absence. He would ask for her, look for her, wait for her. Daniela's funeral was held 2 days after her body was found. Just before the ceremony, the family noticed that Dahmer's relatives had left the neighborhood. They had gone without a word, vanishing completely, as if trying to erase any trace of their connection. This act only compounded the sense of injustice and helplessness among Daniela's loved ones, who feared that her death. The murder of Daniela Spitia Flores not only left a deep wound in her family, but also shook the entire community. The brutality of the crime generated a wave of collective outrage and grief that quickly turned into action. Days later, family, friends, neighbors, and many others moved by her story gathered for a peaceful protest. They came not with hatred but with resolve. Their message was clear: justice for Daniela and real protection for all women. During the demonstration, brave voices rose up, demanding that authorities act urgently to capture the person responsible. They also asked for respect for Daniela's memory, so that her name would not be reduced to just another statistic. Her brother Eduardo, visibly distraught, explained that their fight was not just for his sister, but to prevent another woman from suffering a similar fate. He insisted that institutions must provide genuine support to victims of domestic violence before it is too late. That protest became an act of unity and solidarity. Many women, Some who had never even met Daniela took to the streets with signs, scarves, and heavy hearts. They wanted to be heard. They wanted fear to stop being a part of their daily lives. As a result of the social and media pressure, the Metropolitan Police and the Attorney General's office mobilized. They offered a reward of 5 million Colombian pesos, just over $1,500 for information leading to the whereabouts of Daimer, the sole suspect. However, despite the severity of the case, the official arrest warrant was not issued until several days after Daniela's body was found. In the meantime, authorities began to gather evidence. Investigators began by gathering the testimonies of Daniela's loved ones, meticulously piecing together the final hours of her life. They accessed security footage from the motel and surrounding businesses, hoping to reconstruct her movements and uncover the trail of her assailant. The images from the motel itself proved to be the cornerstone of their case. There in stark clarity was Daniela with a man later identified as Daimer, stepping out of a taxi and entering the establishment together. The camera watched as they lingered for a few moments at the reception desk, speaking with an employee before being handed the key to a room. The room assigned at random was tragically situated at the far end of a hallway, secluded from the view of other guests or staff. Approximately 1 hour later, the same cameras recorded Daimer walking out. He was alone. Armed with this damning evidence, authorities escalated their search. An alert was broadcast across the national police network, a desperate hope that he was still within the country's borders, that they could apprehend him before he vanished without a trace. But Daimer would not be captured until September 6, 2020, nearly 3 weeks after Daniela's murder. He was found in Bogotá, caught by police in the middle of an attempted robbery. His presence in the nation's capital coincided with the reopening of land and air travel following the strict lockdowns of the COVID-19 pandemic. How he had managed to travel across the country undetected, with an active warrant for his arrest, remained a troubling mystery, one that left many with a lingering sense of unease and a shaken faith in the systems meant to protect them. At the time of his arrest, Daimer tried to deceive the officers, presenting an identity document that, upon verification, was quickly revealed to be a forgery. The operational commander of the Bogotá Metropolitan Police later explained that the suspect had altered not only his name but his physical appearance, a clear attempt to evade recognition. But the officers were not fooled. By cross-referencing his fingerprints, they confirmed his true identity beyond any doubt. During a subsequent virtual hearing, in addition to the charge of aggravated femicide for the murder of Daniela, he was indicted for theft and the falsification of a public document. Despite the mountain of evidence against him, including the security footage that placed him with Daniela on the day of her death, Daimer refused to accept responsibility. His denial only sharpened the grief and rage of the Spitia family. Daniela's mother, Janice, was resolute. She spoke publicly, her voice firm, demanding that justice be served without compromise. She asked that the law be applied with its full and unrelenting weight, and stressed that it was vital for the family that he be transferred to Barranquilla to face the consequences of his actions. For her, it was not merely about punishment. It was about dignity. It was about closing an open wound and about protecting others from suffering the same fate. The family made it clear that what they sought from the judicial process was not vengeance, but truth and justice. They needed him to acknowledge what he had done, to answer not only to the authorities but to the children he left without a mother, and to a family he had scarred forever. The legal process moved forward swiftly. Faced with an irrefutable case, Daimer eventually reached a plea agreement with the prosecution, thus avoiding a public trial. Though he had denied the charges in his initial hearings, the evidence compiled by the prosecutor's office, the security tapes, the testimony from motel employees, The statements from Daniela's family and other key elements was so overwhelming that he was left with no other choice but to admit his guilt. The sheer weight of the case, compounded by the emotional force of the testimonies, finally shattered his defiant stance. A full year later, on August 12, 2021, the sentencing hearing finally took place. Conducted virtually due to ongoing health protocols, the court delivered its verdict. 26-year-old Damer was sentenced to 34 years, 8 months, and 20 days in prison for the crime of aggravated femicide. In addition to his sentence, he was barred from holding any public office or related functions for a period of 20 years. He is currently serving his time at La Picota, a high-security prison in Bogotá. While the precise motive for the crime was never fully established, authorities believe an argument erupted inside the motel room. It was then, according to the case hypothesis, that Damer shattered a glass bottle and used it as a weapon, gravely wounding Daniela in the chest. He then allegedly forced a pillow over her face, intending to suffocate her, sealing a brutal and irreversible end. The cruelty of Daniela's murder, compounded by the way her character was questioned and stigmatized in the aftermath, left an indelible scar on all who knew and loved her. Her case, according to official data, was the 21st femicide reported in her department by August of 2020. An alarming figure that underscores the severity of a violence that remains a daily threat for so many women. The story of Daniela Spitia Flores is not only the testimony of a life cut brutally short, it is an urgent summons to our collective conscience. In life, she was a cheerful young woman close to her family, a hard worker full of dreams. In death, her name became a banner in a vital struggle. Through their pain, her case ignited voices and wills that cry out for real change, for justice, for prevention, and for a system that protects its people in time. Today, her memory invites other women not to remain silent, to report abuse, to demand protection. It is a challenge to the institutions that must respond with firmness and resolve. Because every woman has the right to live free from fear, and because no story like Daniela's should ever be repeated.